Good afternoon to those of you online and in the chamber. Welcome to this meeting of the Scrutiny and Audit Committee on Thursday, the 26th of October. Can I just remind members that this is being recorded? There is an issue with the live stream, but it is being recorded. And as usual, if you keep your microphones muted unless you are speaking, because there is an echo, then we'll go on to the system when it goes online. Just before the commencement of the official business, I'd like to welcome Liz Mackenzie, our newest committee clerk, to the meeting today. We're quite a good bunch, Liz, so you'll have a night of it. Good to see you, and I hope you enjoy your time with Angus Council. Mrs. Forsyth, are there any apologies or substitutions, please?
Yes, Convener, we have apologies from Councillors Bell, Doran, Gregg, Proctor, Shepherd and Wan. We have Councillor Boyd substituting for Councillor Bell, Councillor Scott substituting for Councillor Doran, and Councillor McLaren substituting for Councillor Wan.
Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item number 2, declarations of interest and statements of transparency. None? Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 3, the minutes of the previous meetings are submitted for approval as correct records the minutes of meetings of this committee of the 26th of August 2023 and the 29th of August 2023. Are they agreed? Thank you very much indeed. And the first item of business is agenda item number 4. It's the annual performance report 2022-23, and Mrs. Williamson, our Chief Executive, will introduce this. Thank you.
Thanks, Convener. This is indeed the Annual Council Annual Performance Report, and it's already been to Council on the 7th of September, but it's here for detailed scrutiny. The Annual Performance Report covers progress of our improvements since March 2023, and the report aligns with what external auditors deduced in their Best Value report last year and demonstrates Angus Council's ability to transform, adapt and work in partnership. Areas we cannot lose focus of are improving the economy, housing and increasing demand of health and social care. And with that, given that it has already been to Council, I'm prepared to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. I have a couple of questions. Actually, no, it's probably one question, one comment. You want to wait for the comment later?
I don't see any questions, Councillor Devine, apart from yourself. So unless there is any, there's a hand gone up. So yes, we'll stick to questions at the moment. Thank you.
It's just a very small one. It's on the page 19 on the strategy on a page on reduce climate change. I was wondering if we could be adding in a bit there at the end. Given what we've just gone through, this is really about us striving for net zero, which absolutely is the case. But I wonder if we could maybe say something like, take every opportunity to mitigate the effects of the inevitable climate change. And hopefully that will mean making sure that we get more and more resilience groups going, particularly in towns now. I think we need to focus on that. We have some really excellent ones in the rural areas, but I think the towns really need to be having getting groups together. Thank you.
Through you, Convener, thanks very much, Councillor Devine, for that suggestion. As this is the annual report reflecting on the improvement plan, what we will do when we bring forward the updated improvement plan is we will reflect on your words and include that as part of strategy on a page for the report that will come in February with the budget papers.
Provost Boyd, a question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's a small one as well. It's indicator number 7 on page 30, the last sentence. Approximately 13% of all 2-year-olds in Angus had access to a place on this basis in 2022-23. This is quite low, I feel. Is there a target for eligible 2-year-olds, as this is such an important time in their lives, particularly for both language and social development?
Again, through you, Convener, I trust that that has been discussed at the Children and Learning Committee. I would be incredibly surprised if there wasn't a target for that, because we'll be doing a return to government on how successful we are getting 2-year-olds into early year centres. I'm happy to pick up on what that target is for you, Provost Boyd, by contacting the Director and feeding back directly, if that's okay.
Yes, that's absolutely wonderful. Great with the situation after us opening the early learning centre at Carnoustie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Provost. Councillor Scott. Thank you. Question.
Thank you, Convener. I've got a couple of questions. So the first one is on with regards to page 23 of the performance report. So I wonder if you could answer, why are the targets for local suppliers related to location build? So targets for Montefieth say would be included in Angus. So why is it location of build than rather just Angus targets?
Councillor Scott, my answer to that question is, it does strike me a bit strange that Montefieth has been picked out over any of the other towns or boroughs within Angus. And in that case, I would need to get back to you directly, or other members of this committee. Unless there's anyone else online who can help answer that question.
Do we have an officer online that could answer this one? No?
Through yourself, can you repeat that?
Did you hear that, Councillor Scott? Mrs Buchanan is going to get in touch with the procurement team and get you an answer and come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Gavin Nicholl in the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. The percentage of the housing stock meeting the Scottish Housing Quality Standard in 2020-21, it was 94.24%. In 22-23, it's 56.66%. I know we've been through bad times, but why so much of a drop-off?
Through you, Convener, have we got anyone from Housing who can respond to that question? No. In that case, I suspect, Councillor Nicholl, that the criteria will have changed, which has made it a bit more challenging to meet that criteria. But again, I'll get back to you specifically on that indicator.
Okay, Councillor Nicholl. Yeah, thank you, Gavin. Mrs Buchanan.
Thank you, Convener. I do have a response for Councillor Scott. I did think, looking at it, Councillor Scott, it may be something to do with the Montefieth contract for the school. And looking at the bit before this, it does explain that it's part of the Montefieth Learning Campus project. So that will be why Montefieth is particularly detailed in terms of the report.
Councillor Scott, do you want a supplementary?
Yeah, thank you. It was just there's nothing on Angus Rural Mobility Hub. So yeah, that did strike me as strange that it was just for Montefieth. My second question was with regards to page 28 on the performance report. School attendance rates are still low post-pandemic. Exclusion rates are higher, poverty increased, and attainment rates are either static or no data or have decreased. Are schools still struggling with the effects of the pandemic, and what's being done to mitigate that? Thank you.
Councillor Scott, I'd like to answer that question. There are actions being taken in 2 of our boroughs specifically to address the attendance rates. This is starting to work. We've got extra staff to try to get the children into school, and I can assure you that all the schools are having difficulty post-pandemic, as is nationally the case. But when I go around the schools, I'm so impressed by the amount of effort that's being put in there to help the children, young people with their emotional problems and certainly their learning problems, because they did suffer. There's no doubt. These, particularly the wee ones who were at home and came in with without the language development that we would normally have. So Yeah, it's a struggle for our staff, but they are coping really very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Provost, is that a legacy hand? Just in case you want... Yeah, okay. No, that's fine. Any other questions? No. Comment? Councillor Devine.
I mean, there's a lot of good work in this report, and I'm really pleased about it, but I would like to just point out, given that we are dealing with a cost of living crisis here, on page 34 and 35, we've got this great collaboration going on between Welfare Rights and NHS Tayside, bringing in a great deal of money to families. They're supporting pregnant women and their families and have achieved nearly £287,000 financial gains. And then on the next page, there's the 2 full-time financial wellbeing practitioners. I'm not actually sure whether they come from the Welfare Rights team or not. Do they? Do you know? I'm not sure, but when we look at the amount of money they've brought in is £552,000 to families in the last short while, that is greatly helping families with the difficulties. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Any other comments? No, none online then. We have one recommendation. Is this report agreed? Thank you very much.
Yes.
Members, the next one is agenda item number 5, a petition renaming of Cumberland Close, Kerrymuir. From the chair, I am just going my opinion here, and everybody's entitled to their opinion, but I think really this should be, in my view, referred to Angus Council for a debate, because at the end of the day there's unfortunately no Kerrymuir member here today. So I am going to move that we take recommendation 5 and refer the matter to Angus Council. Do I have a seconder?
Second. Yeah.
Okay. Is this then agreed?
Agreed.
Okay,
Agreed.
thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, agenda item number 6 is the annual accounts 2022-23 and the annual audit report to members. Mr. Stephen Mill will introduce this report, but we all also welcome Pauline Gillen, the Audit Director of Audit Scotland, who is with us online. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Convener. The external audit of Angus Council has now concluded, and this report covers the audited annual statements for Angus Council and the charitable funds. A link to both sets of the accounts is included within the covering report, and the external auditor's report on the council and the accounts. It seeks members' approval for the accounts now to be signed. Key messages are set out in paragraph 5.2 of our report. There are 5 recommendations within Audit Scotland's report, which are summarised in Appendix 1 of their report on page 125 of your papers. Management actions have been agreed with external audit in response to these recommendations, and these are also set out in Appendix 1. Now, as normal, a number of adjustments from the figures within the draft accounts have been agreed with Audit Scotland. These are set out in detail in Appendix C to the covering report on page 136 of your papers. Now, it's highlighted that none of these adjustments impact onto the uncommitted general fund. Reserves figure of 2.522 million at 31st of March 23, which was reported in our draft accounts, or indeed the housing revenue account reserve figure of 4.186 million. Now, elected members reviewed the draft accounts at the 22nd of August Scrutiny and Audit meeting. There has been one significant change to the Council's balance sheet position in the audited accounts that is worth highlighting. Now, members may recall from a briefing on the draft accounts in August that the Council's pension liability of 22 million for 2021-22 had moved to a pension asset of 188 million for 22-23. Now, this was in light of the actuarial and accounting to all bodies admitted to the Tayside Pension Fund by the advisors retained by Dundee City Council. Now, subsequent to the draft accounts being submitted, it emerged that the advice within Tayside was inconsistent with that provided to other pension funds in Scotland. This advice concerned how to treat the unique situation we face this year of many Scottish pension funds now being in an asset position. Following national dialogue between actuarial advisors and Audit Scotland, the accounting advice for the Tayside Pension Fund has been amended to be consistent with the rest of Scotland. This advice still recognises, though, that there are legitimate alternative approaches for measuring the pension asset, and the one we're now using is just one of those alternatives. The result of that change in advice is that a pension liability of £9 million will now be recognised in the 2022-23 accounts, rather than a £188 million pension asset. So that's a £197 million reduction in our balance sheet from the draft accounts, but still an improvement on the £22 million liability reflected in our accounts last year. So as highlighted at my previous accounts briefing, pension reserves are unusable in nature, and this accounting change thus has no impact onto the financial well-being of the Council. Further explanation is provided for members in Appendix C to the report around this pension asset change. Now, that's a quick summary of the main change that's taken place. I'll now pass over to Pauline Gillen, our Audit Director from Audit Scotland, who will provide an overview of the audit report. And Pauline's letter from Audit Scotland commences on page 79 of your papers.
Thank you. Yes, as Stephen said, if I could just first of all get you to turn your attention to page 79 of your pack. So we have a number of papers to bring to committee today. The first of these is our annual audit report and the 22-23 annual report and accounts for both the council and the charitable funds. First of all, you could turn to the covering letter. So this letter is addressed to this committee as those charged with governance under ISA 260. And the most important thing to note in this letter is paragraph 1 at the start of the letter, where I can confirm that the audit work on the accounts is now substantially complete and subject to some final checking of the accounts. I anticipate being able to provide unqualified opinions on both the council and the charitable funds, and hopefully they will be signed off at the end of this meeting. Copies of the proposed independent audit reports are included for your information at Appendix A and Appendix B. Under ISA 260, I'm also required to report to this committee any significant findings and key audit matters that we identified as part of our audit work this year. And I'll come on to those a little bit later when I go on to the annual audit report. I'm also required to report to you any unadjusted misstatements that arose as part of the audit work that we carried out. We have there at paragraphs 6 and 7 two issues that we identified during the audit. Neither of those issues exceed our materiality level, which is £11.3 million. However, they do exceed our reporting threshold of £250,000. So we're content that the adjustments haven't been made to the accounts because they're not material, but in line with ISA 260, we have to bring them to your attention because they exceed our reporting threshold. So you'll see there, one of them relates to inconsistency in treatment for financial flexibilities in terms of service concession assets, and that would have had an impact of £0.9 million on the general fund reserve. And then another one, it's an adjustment in relation to the revaluation reserve and the capital adjustment accounts. So both of those are very specific technical accounting adjustments, and management have chosen not to make those adjustments to the accounts. I'm also required in presenting this report to this committee, just to seek confirmation from you as those charged with governance that you're not aware of any actual, suspected or alleged frauds, any events that have occurred since the date of the financial statement, so 31st of March 2023, or any non-compliance with laws or regulations that affect the council and that should be brought to my attention. Nothing's been brought to my attention thus far as part of the audit, so just to pause there and confirm that there is nothing that any members would like to bring to my attention at this point. Okay, I shall take silence as positive. As part of this letter here, you'll see at Appendix C, there's a draft letter of representation, which is prepared under ISA 580. So this letter contains a number of written representations and assurances from the Section 95 officer on aspects of the annual accounts, including some of the judgments and estimates that are made in the accounts. And this letter will be signed by the Section 95 officer at the same time of signing the annual report and accounts after this meeting. Just to point out there at paragraph 11, we outline some outstanding matters in terms of assurances from Teesside Pension Fund, just to confirm that between the letter being issued and today we have received that outstanding information. So I'm happy to confirm that there's no outstanding information that I require to enable me to sign off the accounts. So next, if I could get you to turn to item 6, Appendix B, which is our annual audit report, and that's at page 93 of your PDF pack. So this annual audit report essentially summarises the work that we've carried out during the year and the findings from that work. Page 3 of the report provides the key messages that have arisen from the work. And you'll see there at the top there, we have essentially the findings of the work on the annual report and accounts. And then below that, we also include findings on the best value work that we've done during the year. And we also include consider the 4 wider scope areas that are covered by public sector audit. So I'll take the paper as read, but just a couple of things I'd like to draw to your attention. So first of all, at Exhibit 2, apologies, I don't have the page number in the PDF. So Exhibit 2 outlines significant findings and the key audit matters that I have to report to this committee. And this arises from the work that the team have been doing over the last couple of months. We have 8 findings to bring to your attention. 6 of them have resulted in adjustments to the accounts, and 2 of them are unadjusted misstatements. Those are the 2 that I referred to earlier in my covering letter. So I'm not going to go through all of them because management's letter report at Appendix C outlines the detail behind some of these adjustments, and I think that captures the nature of them. Just to confirm to members that we're content that all the adjustments where material have been made to the accounts, and we've followed through those changes in the accounts, and we're content that they've been made correctly. So what I'll maybe do is just draw out a couple of the issues that have resulted in us including a recommendation. So as Stephen mentioned earlier, that first one relating to the pension fund. So in contrast to all previous years since the introduction of IAS 19, local government pension schemes in Scotland are reporting a pension asset at the end of the year, as opposed to pretty significant liabilities in previous years. So this is incredibly unusual, and I think it's safe to say that actuaries and auditors, as well as finance professionals, have been kind of caught out a little bit, and there's been a bit of inconsistency in terms of how the guidance is treated. The standards are relatively clear on how surpluses should be treated. So IAS 19 is the relevant standard, also within a further recommendations from IFRIC 14, which means that bodies are not able to, under those standards, are not able to recognise the entirety of the pension asset on their balance sheets. And as Stephen alluded to earlier, the actuary provided some information on a cap. So essentially there's a ceiling on the amount of the asset that you're allowed to recognise in the balance sheet. Was a bit of discussion backwards and forwards between auditors and actuaries about the assumptions and the methodology to be used in those calculations. And we had asked Barnett Waddingham to go back and revise their figures in order to be consistent with the rest of the public sector in Scotland, so that all local government pension schemes were using the same methodology in calculating that asset ceiling. So we are content that the actuary has provided satisfactory revised figures, and that's resulted in the changes that have been mentioned earlier to the accounts. And also, as mentioned, these are unusable reserves, so it's not funds that would have been available to the council to use. We also have noted there in the resolution column that Angus Alive also has recognised a pension asset in their accounts. We're not the auditors of Angus Alive, and those accounts had been signed off before we had got onto this issue for the council. So we've just noted there an alternative approach for Angus Alive's accounts, and we have in there a recommendation that for next year we just address any issues like that. There's obviously a bit of a timing issue in terms of when issues are resolved in the group bodies, so that's something we'll follow up with management next year. At item number 2, that relates to the service concession arrangement that management didn't correct in the account. So that's a £0.9 million, and you'll see there in the, so just an inconsistency in treatment. Something we'll follow up for 23-24. It's in the action plan as a recommendation to management, and you'll see from management's response that they'll give consideration to it next year, and in discussion with auditors just to confirm that it remains appropriate for that treatment to be followed for next year. We have at point 4 a recommendation with regards to accounts disclosures, and we've just given a recommendation that a disclosure checklist should perhaps be utilised by finance staff just to ensure that all all code of practice accounting requirements have been met. So this year we identified an £8.8 million adjustment to the movement and reserve statement. That would not have impacted the bottom line if management, management did adjust it in the accounts, but it didn't result in a bottom line change. So there's a number of other technical accounting issues that I won't go into in too much detail, but at point 6 we have another recommendation in, and that is again a technical accounting adjustment that is related to the revaluation reserve to account for depreciation on revalued assets. We identified differences of £1 million. These were not adjusted in the audited accounts, and we were content with that. We've got a management response in again that will follow that point up in 23-24, just to assure appropriate adjustments are made. So that was all I wanted to mention in terms of the ISA 260 points. At Exhibit 3, we have the significant risks and material misstatement that we identified as part of our planning and risk assessment process. Members will recall that these risks were in the annual audit plan that was brought to you earlier in the year. We have in the middle column there the assurance procedures that auditors carried out during the year to address those risks, and in the final column you'll see the results and conclusions arising from that work. So the first one there is the risk and misstatement due to fraud caused by management override of controls. That's a standard risk that you'll see in all audit plans and reports. And you'll see there in the results and conclusions that we had no issues that identified management had overridden any of the key financial controls. We also included a risk with regard to estimation and the valuation of land and buildings, and that's just recognising the significant degree of subjectivity in those valuations. An important part of the work that we do to address that risk is to assess the adequacy and the competence of the valuer who provides the valuations. And again, we've concluded we had no issues with the competence of the valuer, and we were able to conclude that land and buildings in the financial statements are not materially misstated. Over the page at paragraphs 27 to 32, we include some of the findings that arose from the audit of the charitable trust funds. I'm joined on the call today by Mark Laird, who's the appointed auditor for those funds. And at the end of this agenda item, Mark would be happy to take any questions or comments on the audit of those funds. And we note there at paragraph 33, as part of the audit, we follow up on prior year recommendations from the previous audit team. And we've noted good progress with 2 of them now marked as complete. The rest of them, we have management responses to update what the proposed action is, and where appropriate, some revisions to the target and response rate. Section 2 covers our best value work. So what we've covered as part of this year's audit, members will recall that there's a change to the best value approach for this year, where all auditors are required to do thematic work, and each year that theme will change. So the theme for this year was leadership of the development of local strategic priorities, and our detailed findings on that work is included at agenda item 8. But you'll see in this report at paragraph 37 onwards, we've highlighted what the key findings of those reports, of that report are, and we've also included some action plan points and recommendations at the end of this report. We'll just move on to, apologies, I've just lost my place here. And we're also required to report to members any findings that arose from the work we did on the systems of financial control. You maybe recall in previous years and previous audit appointments, we would bring a separate paper to committee that would report on any weaknesses we've identified. We've moved away from that, and we would typically only report to this committee by exception only if we found some significant issues of weakness in your financial controls, or we would just report in our annual audit report to the committee at the end of the audit. And I'm pleased to confirm that we didn't find any significant weaknesses in that required us to change our audit approach and do any additional work. So just to turn to Appendix 1, which is our action plan. I think I've covered all the 22-23 recommendations that arose from our work. You'll see there that we've got an agreed management action in the final column with an agreed target date to address those actions. I think I've covered all of them. The only one that I haven't touched upon is the long-term financial planning one. And we note there the intention of management to use the long-term financial planning framework to further develop long-term financial plans in future. And that's something we'll follow up in future years. We also have, after that, we have the 22-23 recommendations from that thematic work that I referred to earlier. And you'll see there that we have 5 recommendations. And again, we have management responses to each of those, and we will follow that up as part of next year's audit. And finally, at the end there, we have follow-up of prior year recommendations. And as I mentioned earlier, 2 of those are now complete, and the remaining ones have management actions and updated revised timescales for completion. So that was all I was planning to say, but I'm happy to take any comments or questions. I'm joined by the Senior Manager of the Audit, Mark Laird, and also Neil O'Connor, who is the Senior Auditor in the audit. And between the 3 of us, hopefully we'll be able to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pauline. That was very detailed. Any questions for Audit Scotland or indeed our own Mr. Mill? Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. I want to thank you both for giving us a lot of clarification over pensions, which, I mean, I know that Stephen has told us about this before, but it's always a bit of a difficulty for elected members, I think. But also over the Beach Hill situation, which I was going to ask a question about, so I don't have to do that. And I don't have to really ask about the misstatements, although there seem to be more than we usually have. I don't know if either of you, maybe Stephen can tell me a little bit about that. But my main question is actually on page 107, and this is to do with ACCT. This is the charitable trust, which we've been concerned about for a long time, and we did change it a bit, but we still are not able to give out funds to people. And at a particular time like this, with financial hardship, I think we maybe need to take some radical action. I don't know who to address this to particularly, but at the moment it just seems that we've still got far too many small pots of money which are not worth any. Whereas if we had one great big fund, maybe there could be more about that. But I don't know. Oscar perhaps has to be involved with this as well. And I know that our legal department has been absolutely chock-a-block, but we have asked for some ideas to go forward with this, because it's not acceptable that for 4 years running we've given no money out of this fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. And our own Mr. Lorimer is going to answer this one, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Devine. Yes, the intention is to bring a report on that very matter to the meeting of the trustees next month. We have an outstanding remit. I think the trustees agreed some time ago now to consolidate the various funds or the sub-funds, I should say, so that the monies available would be more usable. So that is something that we've been, and I think we had a remit to go back to discuss that with Oscar, which we've now done. So we'll be in a position to bring that back to the trustees. The plan is to do that in November.
That is really good news. Thanks very much. And thanks for all the work that I'm sure it entails.
Thank you both. Mr Mill, I see your hands up. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, sorry, just to come back on Councillor Devine's comment about misstatements. Actual number, I've not got an empirical figure, but I think they're roughly the same, year on year. We don't get, multiples of additional misstatements this year. I think what's probably highlighting it is we'll have a couple of misstatements where we've not adjusted, and we've said we're going to actually look at those in a bit more detail and give consideration to them. So one about the movement in reserves and between the two the reserves in there, and also with regard to the service concessions. So it's probably highlighted more because in the past we would have probably changed all the, addressed all the misstatements, but there's a couple of them this year we're going, well, actually we want to look at these in a bit more detail out with the audit process.
Thank you very much. No further questions? Comments? No? Okay, then we've got 5 recommendations in front of us. The other one, the bottom one, is to go to the council. Is this report agreed? Okay, and just on behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank Mr Lorimer and his team. I know there's some online, Gillian and Jill, Stephen, and our colleagues from Audit Scotland, because that was very comprehensive, and I think that's why there wasn't a lot of questions, because it was presented, as it always is, so comprehensively, so thank you. Okay, members, the next one is agenda item number 7, the Local Government in Scotland Financial Review 21-22 and Overview 2023, and it's a joint report by our Director of Finance and Director of Legal Governance and Change, Mrs Buchanan, and our Director of Finance, Mr Lorimer. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. I'll speak first, probably on the easier part of the report. It is a sizable report. There's a lot of information in this report, so I'll not say too much about it. The bit that I'm covering is the financial overview, which is in Appendix A. That's looking at the financial position across all councils, and it's for financial year 21-22. So it's it was a wee while ago now. The key messages are actually summarised within the report. They cover the main points. Really, the thrust of those is the issues that are very familiar, I think, to elected members around current and future financial challenges. So those are very well known about locally and nationally indeed. Just one thing to flag on the second part of the report, which is on Appendix D, which is on page 233. We've noticed there's actually a gap in one of the answers to the questions. It's a question about opportunities for communities to influence decisions on local priorities and about consultation with communities. What we should have said in terms of response to that is that we're doing a number of things. One, in terms of the recent launch of Engage Angus, which you'll probably be aware of, and the other one was I think it was the September council meeting. We brought a report outlining what we were planning to do on communication and engagement around the council's budget. So those would be the 2 background things I would specifically highlight in relation to that omission within the report. But at this point, I'll hand over to Mrs Buchanan to talk about the remaining bits of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Lorimer. So in terms of the remaining parts of the report, members will note that Appendix B is the annual overview report itself from Accounts Commission. I think it's good to see the picture nationally. It is, of course, from 21-22, so isn't current in terms of, for example, the impact of the pandemic, because it was still very much going on then. I think in terms of the previous reports, the aspects that the report covers are how has the pandemic affected councils and their performance, what are the current and future challenges facing local government, and how well placed are we to deal with these challenges. And there's information given on that in the report itself. There's sort of 5 key messages relating to obviously the financial type of things. Clearly budget constraints are significant, and I think that's a national issue. Community needs and inequalities is the second main area. There's a focus on collaboration and how important that is, particularly when we are so short in terms of resources. There's a focus on leadership and how important that is. And you'll remember in terms of the best value audit that was a positive that we had as Angus Council. And the last area is workforce, which clearly is important too, in terms of retaining staff and being able to attract staff, which can be an issue. There's a supplement with the report that has a range of case studies. We'll note that in particular, in terms of the wellbeing initiatives, Angus Council is narrated as an example of best practice there, in terms of our resilience programme to promote staff wellbeing, and a programme for leaders is in the development at the moment. Happy to take any questions in relation to the detail of the report. Thank you.
Thank you to both Mr Lorimer and Mrs Buchanan. Do we have any questions? Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. On page 184, there's a case study about South Lanarkshire and the Improvement Service, and they've come out with a tool to, well, it's a dashboard that allows councils to explore and analyse all the performance indicators. Are we using this? Are we planning to use this at all? Or would it not be particularly useful? We may, in fact, have something similar already, but it just looked quite interesting.
Yeah, thanks. Through you, Convener. The dashboard, there's actually an improvement. There's a dashboard on the Improvement Services website. I'm not 100% sure, actually, Councillor Devine, if the case study there is referring to that or a different dashboard, but I can tell you that we are doing significant work around data and performance using business insights and particular software around that. This is an area I think we really need to continue to improve on in terms of understanding our performance and how that performance varies depending on what we invest. So I think it possibly refers to the dashboard on the LGBF website, but happy to have a look at that and see if that is indeed the case.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions? Councillor Devine?
I just wondered why we didn't include the Tay Cities deal in the answers to the questions that we might consider under number 8, working closely enough with other councils. I just thought that would be one that could be added in there. And in terms of attracting workforce to Angus, we may just have to take out an advert somewhere and tell them how wonderful it is to live here. I mean, people are thrilled to the Central Belt, and yet house prices are so much better here. The quality of life is so much better. And I think we maybe have to look at something pretty radical there as well, just to let people know that it's a fine place to work and live.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? No comments? No, I would just like to agree with what Councillor Devine has just said. I think one of our straplines is Angus is a great place to live, work and visit. So I think you're absolutely correct. We'll maybe have to spread the wings of the adverts a bit more to try and attract people to come here. Okay then, if there's no further comments, we have the 5 recommendations in front of us. Is this report agreed? Thank you very much. Agenda item number 8 is the Best Value Thematic Work in Councils 2022-23, and our Chief Executive, Mrs Williamson, is going to introduce this one. Thank you.
Thanks, Convener, and it was great to see so many case studies in that previous report for Angus Council. This report presents Audit Scotland's report on Angus Council's leadership of the new local strategic priorities, which is part of the new approach to best value. The key messages are listed under 4.4. Sorry, 4, not 4.44. And impressively, just to pick out a few, we have a clear vision. We are committed to meaningful engagement with communities, and elected members work well together for the people of Angus. As you'll see at 5, there are also improvement actions, but most of these improvement actions, if not all, are either underway or already completed. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Williamson. Any questions? No. These reports are so well presented and so detailed. I think all the answers that we've got are actually in the reports. No. Okay. Any comments? Okay then. Is this report agreed? Thank you. And number 9 is the internal audit activity update, and Mrs. Wiley from our internal audit team will speak on this one. Good afternoon, Cathy.
Good afternoon. Thank you. This is the usual update on the progress that we have with implementing the plan and also the implementation of the recommendations that have been agreed with services following each of the reports that we have created during the year. There are 2 additional things that I've got here for you this time round. One of those is just to note that there's been an addition of a serious organised crime audit into the 23-24 plan. That audit is currently underway. And also to note that there has been no change in the guidance relating to the audit charter, and therefore there's no update required at this time. We usually review the charter on an annual basis, but there aren't any changes needed to it this time. There are a couple of things that I just want to draw to your attention at 3.7, which is on page 267. Just an update. As you know, there's a vacancy within the internal audit team. We have been taking forward the admin that's needed to be able to advertise that job and to hopefully get someone into that post as soon as possible, and that is underway at the moment. We've also got the tender out for the audit support that we'll have for IT and general audit if we need it, and that's out for tender at the moment, and the closing date for that is the 30th of October. So hopefully at the next meeting I'll be able to tell you who our new audit support firm will be. And the final thing, just to draw to your attention in 3.10 there, following a review of the pilot year of me job sharing with Dundee City Council, we're just in the process at the moment of formalising what will need to be done to make that permanent. So that's underway at the moment. So if I move on to the assurances that we're bringing today, there are 2 pieces of work that have been finalised and are being reported today. One is payroll, the other is IT asset hardware inventory. Both of them are substantial assurance. If you just bear with me till I get to the page, I'll start with the payroll audit. Payroll audit was added to the plan last year at the request of the service, and that was on the back of having had a few issues that had arisen within payroll, and they wanted us to look at what had been done to address these issues and to make sure that the interim measures as well as the permanent measures that were being put in place were actually sufficient to deal with the issues that had been identified. So you'll see on page, where you get the page number 276, that the overall conclusion for this piece of work is substantial assurance. However, the audit has taken a bit of time to complete. It started back in January 2023, and the reason for the delay in reporting it until now has been a combination of factors around the resource issues within payroll, secondment of staff within the internal audit team, and also the ongoing work that payroll was undertaking to make sure that they were addressing the issues that had been identified. When we issued the draft report back in July this year, there was a limited assurance level on the report because we had a number of recommendations that still hadn't been addressed. But in the period that it has elapsed since then until we finalised the report in August, a large number of these recommendations were completed, and that included 4 priority 1 recommendations. And so we felt it was only fair to reassess this as a substantial assurance. However, we didn't want to take the time that it would have taken to substantially rewrite the report, given that we had been undertaking this piece of work for a period of time, and we had been liaising with the service throughout that, so that each time we identified issues, they were discussed with them and they were able to take them forward immediately. So on page 278, you'll see that we've got the original improvement actions there in terms of the number that were there in the draft report against what we have left now, which are only three priority. There are three actions, 2 priority 2s and 1 priority 3 that are still outstanding, and the dates for the completion of those are, one is the end of November and the other 2 are the end of December. We did identify some good practice when we were undertaking this audit around segregation of duties when making updates to the payroll system parameters, and also that there are a significant number of templates and checklists in place for use for a number of areas within payroll to help the staff who are undertaking these tasks. There are also planned improvements that are ongoing at the moment within the service in terms of implementing the new structure from the recent staffing and payroll service review. There are plans in place to collate all of the payroll guidance and the documented procedures into one area on SharePoint. And there are also other changes ongoing to try and improve some of the processes, including the digitisation of some of the processes to make them more automated. On page 279, you can see all of the actions that we did identify. Some of these were around making sure that things that were being done were properly documented, so that if new people came into the service, they would understand what was required in certain areas. And some of the others were just about making sure that timetables were as up to date as possible and as comprehensive as possible to make sure that everybody understood what was being required. The 3 actions that are still outstanding are the last 3 in the list on that page, so the last 2 in the priority 2 list and the priority 3 action. So those are around a long-term solution, identifying more than 2 officers with relevant security access for payroll processing to make sure that we can have segregation of duties within that going forward. Also, we need to establish what management and statutory payroll reports are required on a regular basis and make sure that these are being produced by the right people at the right time and passed on to the right people for action. And the final one is just one around making sure that when we're producing procedures, etc., that these are dated and that a review term is identified and that the dates are on these so that these can be kept up to date and reviewed when they need to be in future. That was payroll. In terms of the IT asset hardware inventory, this item had been carried forward from a previous year, and it had been delayed to allow some of the actions that had been identified from a fraud investigation to be implemented. So as part of this audit, as well as looking at various things in terms of making sure that there were inventories of hardware that the stock was being matched with the inventory and reconciliations performed, and that we had procedures in place for making sure that starters and leavers kit was being recorded properly in terms of the inventory. Looking at the asset management plan and the procedures that were in and guidance that were in place for the use and care of assets that were being used remotely. We also looked at some of the actions that had been agreed previously with the counter fraud team. We did identify that some of those had not been fully implemented, and so these have been reiterated in the actions that were agreed for this report. You'll see on page 281 that we have substantial assurance for this report, and you'll also see at the top of page 82, if you look at the colour scheme here in terms of the comparison with the payroll one, they've both got substantial assurance, but there's a bit more orange and red in this one than there was in the previous one. And the reason for that really is because each of these individual objectives doesn't necessarily have equal weighting when we come to assess the overall position for the area under review. And when you look at the 2 priority 1 actions that we have for this area, one of them is making sure that we're doing reconciliations of the physical stock with the stock records, and the other is around having an asset management plan in place. And when we looked at those two in comparison to the rest of the areas that we had been looking at here and the information that was available, we didn't really feel that it downgraded this from substantial to being limited. We do have other recommendations here around procedures, around levers, and making sure that staff confirm the receipt of IT equipment when they receive that. And we also have a couple of level 4 recommendations, which are really about trying to improve procedures that are already in place just to make things work a little bit more easily and make sure that people understand what their role in the processes are. We also identified that there is some future developments here around a new software system for recording a database of the records of the hardware inventory, which should make all of the other things that we've suggested easier to undertake. The final information within this report is just the tables around the actions that are currently in progress. I don't have anything in particular that I need to draw to your attention there, but I'm happy to take any questions that you have on the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cathy. Are there any questions? Again, a very detailed and comprehensive report. Questions? No. Comments? Councillor Devine.
Yes, thanks, Convener. I think it's been obviously very well worthwhile doing these two audits on the payroll and the IT assets. I want to commend the people working in these departments for the work they've undertaken to improve the situation already, and will continue to improve it, I'm sure. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. I echo these words as well. Anyone else? Okay, the recommendations are in the report. Is this report agreed? Okay, thank you, Mrs. Wiley. Agenda item number 10, detailed risk reporting to the Scrutiny and Audit Committee. Mrs. Wiley again.
Thank you. Sorry, this is the usual report that comes to each meeting, just bringing you up to date on a bit more detail around some of the risks that are in the corporate risk register. The risk that's being looked at today is legislation, and I would like to pass over to Mrs. Buchanan, please, for her to be able to give you her information around this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wiley. So in terms of legislation, members will see the various existing controls that we have on page 290 of the report. I'll give you a bit of background in relation to what we do in order to mitigate risks of not being aware of current legislative obligations and duties, and also in terms of new legislation. So in terms of the current legislation, as you can imagine, it's a huge plethora of different pieces of legislation that are relevant for councils. And what we've tried to do is actually get a list of our duties and have that, and try to keep it up to date insofar as we can. I don't think any council could put their hand on heart and say that the list that they have is fully comprehensive, but it's as good as we can get. Now, a clear aspect of that is keeping abreast of new legislation as it comes forward. So in terms of that, there isn't really actually any sort of indication that you can get from either the UK or Scottish Parliament when they're intending to put legislation on. But what we do is we have someone in our team who manually checks the UK Government's website and also the Scottish Government's website in relation to consultations, and they do this a few times a week. It's quite a quick process to do that. Then once a week they meet with a solicitor in the team, and they determine which of these consultations are relevant for our council. Then the service that it relates to will put together a response if they feel that's appropriate, and that will be submitted on behalf of the council. In relation to any strategic or more important consultations, we try as far as possible to bring that to committee. Sometimes the time constraints don't allow for that, but we'll do it as far as we can. And we're going to provide specific provisions for that in relation to the new scheme of governance that we're putting before the MOG. We don't simply respond in terms of consultations, but we keep an eye on the proposed legislation and bill as it goes through Parliament, and then when it becomes in force, we'll look at how it impacts on the Council and if there's any financial or operational implications that it has. We ensure that the relevant officers are aware, and we take the steps as necessary to do that. I guess a recent example is the short-term lets. There was quite a lot of work in relation to that, and we followed that process for that initiative. The other thing that we have is we have various updates from law firms. Not only does that include legislation, they too look at consultations, but it also in relation to any case law that could impact on our practice. And we're arranging actually to have a monthly update to the managers throughout the Council if there's any particular aspect of what's been reported to us that we feel would be relevant for them to be aware of, whether that be in relation to qualities or any other matter, because there's lots of areas that have developing case law, and new legislation can be difficult at times to be definitive about until it's tested. So I feel that we have quite a comprehensive approach to this, and we have it all detailed on a spreadsheet, so we keep up to date and we have an audit trail of what we're doing and what we're looking at. But I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions?
Convener, I just wondered how helpful COSLA is in this. Do they bring everything together as well and then kind of put it out to councils, or are you kind of left on your own with that one? I mean, it's pretty mind-blowing, I think, with all the legislation that's coming through, and so much of it seems to impact on councils these days. So I was hoping that COSLA might be helpful.
COSLA is helpful in the sense that the reports that go to COSLA that I have sight of, so I can see what's been put before COSLA for consideration. I think more our SOLAR colleagues, which is the sort of group that look at what lawyers do and committee clerks do throughout Scotland, and we tend to get a lot of information through the various knowledge hub groups that exist through SOLAR, so that is quite helpful. And in fact, I'm president of SOLAR at the moment, and I've put together a group of, and lots of heads of legal are interested, and we've met already in relation to look at how we can be more effective in connection with national initiatives. So if there's new legislation or a tricky piece of law that we need to look at, we're intending to do it on a group basis rather than us all do the same thing. And I think that will be more effective and efficient.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. Comments? No comments. Is the report agreed? Thank you very much. Agenda item number 11, again, it's by our Director of Legal Governance and Change, the Complaints and Compliments Report for Q1. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. As the Convener says, this is the Complaints and Compliments Report for Q1. We have the standard information that we normally report to committee. I draw your attention to the fact that we have the housing updates that committee have asked for, and we've also added the provision in relation to compliments. So you have some detail on some of these that come before, will basically are provided to the services in relation to what they're doing, which is also always a positive thing. What I would add is that under paragraph 5.10 of the report, in order to demonstrate the Council's learning from complaints, and really so that we have more meaningful information to the before the committee, work's being carried out for the next committee, highlighting key themes and learning points for the organisation. And this will allow the first 6 months of learning to be available to committee members, and we're hoping to get in place a system to centrally record any lessons learned, and that's currently being looked at. So clearly part of the complaints, a big part of it is lessons learned in relation to the complaints that are brought before us. Now, in terms of the themes emerging, maybe not surprisingly, timious responses is a bit of an issue in terms of what the public are expecting, and it's simply with service demands at times. It can be very difficult to keep up to date in relation to that, and we do as much as we can in relation to it. And you'll see that's been picked up in terms of the earlier report, the local government overview, and one of the things the Accounts Commission has mentioned that the Council needs to let the public know about the scale of service demands that we're facing and also the extent of backlogs that in turn creates. But happy to take any questions on the detail.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Councillor Speed.
Thank you. I just wondered if you're able to provide a little bit more detail in terms of the communication failures. Do you know what type of communication is kind of perhaps more significant? Is it, you know, online? Is it access line? And what is it that, is it just not getting a response back? Is the information not being filtered to the correct department? Obviously it shows there what departments are identifying the communication failure, but my concern is that this is a bigger problem than is being recorded, because perhaps not everyone will go as far as making a kind of complaint against the council. They certainly, when people come to me and as an elected member, they're maybe not aware of the complaints process and they're just frustrated. So a bit more detail on that, please.
So in terms of made, as you'll appreciate, Councillor Speed, we deal with the complaints that are made to us, and if you're aware of other ones that are not being brought forward, certainly, you know, we're happy to hear about that. I think in terms of lessons learned, which is I think what you're referring to, that's the intention to bring back to the next committee report, and we'll certainly look. That's part of the issue that's been highlighted. I think, having spoken to the officer that deals with complaints, and I specifically did that before the meeting, the main issue that they were highlighting is really just the number of resources that we have and the ability to respond timely. You'll see that in terms of the complaints, if you look at the figures, you know, the last time the number of upheld complaints were not huge. I think this quarter they're certainly a bit higher, but still quite a positive reading. And as I say, we could bring back more detail in terms of where the issues are when we bring back the report next cycle.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. And just as a kind of follow-up comment, or I can come back to that, convener, if you would prefer.
No, on you go, Councillor Speed. There's no one else got their hands up.
It was in particular with regards to the way in which councillor queries in relation to housing are being dealt with currently. I've raised it before and I'll raise it again. I think that's just an added complication. Sometimes people will come to us, sometimes constituents will come, they've maybe raised a complaint against the council, they're maybe coming to us as well, or perhaps they're coming to us because they're having an issue within housing, and we're now having to go through such a complicated process to get our constituent inquiries handled. And sometimes there is a connection with these official complaints that we're talking about today, but you know, the report clearly highlights that there's an issue in communication, and yet as councillors, our communication.
Councillor Speed, you're on mute.
Have I been speaking all that time to myself? Sorry.
No, just the last couple of words. No, you're fine.
Okay, sorry, it must have jumped, sorry. So yeah, it was really just to say that hugely concerned that our constituent cases and the methods of communication that are currently being operated in terms of housing inquiries have become more complex than ever, and the delays in getting a response and getting back to a constituent it's quite frustrating and quite concerning as well.
Thank you, Councillor Speed. I think Mrs. Williamson's going to answer this one. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Speed. I'm well aware of what you're raising, because obviously you've raised it with me, and the response from the Director is really around giving a trial to a new system so we can record a bit more clearly. I understand the frustrations. As I understand it, it's a short period of time that will then be reviewed, and obviously the comments back, not just from yourself but others, will be taken into consideration. So if you could just bear with us a bit longer on that one, but we will say it's been raised against Scrutiny and Audit.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Questions? No. Comments? No. Is this report agreed? Thank you very much. And the final item, and I'll use the short word again, Mrs Buchanan, the RIPSA report, quarterly report. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. As members will see from the report, there's been one covert surveillance activity authorised during the period. There's been no covert human intelligence source authorisations, and in terms of the activity that was approved to be used, the appropriate process was followed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll obviously give the opportunity for questions and comments, but I think this is very straightforward. Yes. Okay, is this report agreed?
Convener,
Oh, yeah, sorry,
could I just ask
Councillor
a
Devine.
question which is not in the report, but it's about RIPSA. We got an email inviting us to a briefing on RIPSA, and I kind of thought that was too operational for us. Would you not agree?
And I think it was a recommendation in terms of the, we had a review of our RIPSA and they suggested that members just have an awareness of what that involves. So I think that was the driver for the training request.
Okay, that's the end of the meeting. I think that's a record. No adjournments today. So thank you all, both virtually and in person, for your attendance and contribution, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Convener.